Thanks for tuning in to the Medevac podcast, powered by the Robert Irvine Foundation, whose mission is to support and strengthen the physical and mental well-being of our nation's heroes and their families. I'm one of your hosts, David Reid.
And I'm your other host, Christian Meyers. Thank you very much for joining us today on the Medevac podcast. Our guest today is Johnny Wilson. He is a former 18 Delta Green Beret. He spent about 13 years in the Army doing that. And now he does a multitude of other things and continues to give back in his own ways. So welcome, Johnny.
Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me. Good to see you again after a couple months.
Yeah. Last time we saw was here in Dallas at Texas Valor Project.
Yeah, TVP. Bunch of good dudes here.
And you were pretty fresh on your injury.
Yeah, I that was like day 3 on a test socket, so I was like waddling around like a baby deer, hoping I didn't fall. And yeah, that was it was an interesting time.
Yeah. Learning how to walk.
It was a good introduction to you, though, by the way. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll table that discussion for a little bit later, and kind of rewind it back to how you got started and what kind of inspired you to join the military.
I had a lot of different, inspirations. This was so I joined. Actually, signed the paperwork in '99. Didn't go till 2000. So I had no clue. I knew for a fact I wasn't going to college.
Okay.
Money wasn't available. There was actually some hints of, believe it or not, basketball scholarships, but it was all going to be partial. Country boy. So I was living in the mountains of North Carolina, going to high school. No real job prospects there. And the Army was extremely attractive. Basically from they'll pay me every 2 weeks. They'll keep me physically fit. I get to go somewhere else and learn some new things. I don't know what I'm getting into, but it sounds attractive. There, I worked nonstop, either at a job or we were always cutting wood or we were always repairing something, a bunch of farmland. So the work aspect was no big deal, but I was like, man, I get consistently paid, whatever, let's figure this out.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot of that. And then, about a year after I joined, 9/11 happened, which kind of redirected, if you will, some things that I was looking into. But yeah, that was the basic inspiration.
Yeah.
So no family or friends who had joined the military beforehand? Or?
No. Okay. I mean, I had this guy that I knew that one time, but I didn't know what he was gonna be doing. So no, I was kind of like the first of my family there. My brother followed a few years later.
Okay.
But went a completely different route. But yeah, I wanted a change of scenery. I didn't dislike where I was, but I wanted a different life.
Yeah. More opportunity for
let's
yourself.
Let's figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I learned everything after the fact. It's like, ready, fire, aim.
Yeah.
So you had completed your training by the time that 9/11 happened, or you're still kind of going through it?
I was in a mechanized infantry unit.
Okay.
Central Texas. So yeah, infantry basic, OSIT, all that other stuff, 6 or 7 months. And then we had just gotten back from the National Training Center in California, miserable desert time.
Oh, yeah.
Shower 2 or 3 times in 70-something days. The day we got back was September 10th.
Wow.
The morning of the 11th was the actual next day. So we watched it on TV and, we knew something was going to happen. We just didn't know what.
Sure.
And everyone was trying to figure it out.
Yeah, everyone's running around with their heads cut off.
Yeah, gate guard, checking everyone's ID. Everyone's an enemy. Like that whole thing was a weird time. But,
how soon after that did you spin up to deploy, I imagine?
So I was about a year in. The initial push into Iraq, I'm pulling from memory here, didn't involve us. It was going to, the third ID and other entities. My element got orders to deploy like a year and a half, maybe 2 years later. So it wasn't, we weren't involved in that. During that time, we were in the field nonstop, and I started disliking a lot of things within my unit, mainly the guys the NCO leadership that had been there forever, never promoted, never done anything. So, it was
not wartime as well.
It was,
none of them are combat oriented.
Yeah, none of that. So, there was all these assumptions that we're going to go, which never happened. But I was physically in shape, and I had to, I got to that point where I knew I wanted a change out of that environment, and I was watching what was happening, specifically on the Ranger Regiment and the Special Forces side at that point. There was no way, there were 0 Ranger slots in the unit that I was in. So that wasn't going to happen.
Okay.
So my only real option to change was go to a selection process. And there were a few options at the time, but I had some time to figure that out because I didn't have enough rank.
So was Ranger your first choice?
I didn't have a first choice. I was looking at them both. I didn't know anything about anything.
Okay.
And of course, when you're 18 or 19, you know everything. I can do it all. I'll never quit. I don't have to sleep. So I didn't really know, but I was kind of building that. And the more that I looked into it, I started seeing more diversity under the Special Forces side. And it didn't have the infantry tag with it. To be clear, I mean, the Rangers are excellent at, strategic level all the way down to the individual when it comes to infantry tactics. SF was a little bit different for me, the way in their approach anyway. And I knew some guys in SF that I was slowly meeting that were telling me things that they were experiencing. And then you watch just the op tempo. If you go back and look through the lens of history, it was pretty wild.
Yeah.
So that's what made it more attractive.
Sure, that makes sense.
Ranger in a mechanized unit in 2003, 4, and 5, just don't even say it because it doesn't exist. I mean, there was a Department of the Army obstacles that we couldn't get past.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you made your way into selection. Did you pass your first time around?
Yeah, I did. I went in the summer of 2003. I forgot. We had hundreds of people there, and I think it was like a 40-person, 50-person selection class.
Okay.
Typical, standard, my feet were miserable, hamburger. It was a month at the time. I'm not sure how long it is now. Came right back, and 2 days later, so while I was there, my unit got those combat deployment orders.
Oh, okay.
So they were setting up and jocking up to prep to deploy. Mm-hmm. They had their pre-mission stuff first. So I went to selection, got back. 48 hours later, I was going back to the National Training Center for another 2 months.
Oh, man.
To train up.
After your feet are just probably tanked and
I was
trashed.
the only person in Fort Hood. So they got stop loss. Excuse me. So the Army put a stop loss on all things Fort Hood. I was the only guy who got to clear Fort Hood later that year. It was like a ghost town in CIF. Like I had these orders from some general in North Carolina somewhere saying that I was not the property of Fort Hood at a certain date, and no one believed me. Like you're trying to get out of a deployment, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. But they got those orders while I was gone. National Training Center got laid on. All that stuff was happening. So their pre-deployment wheels were spinning aggressively, which I had to come back in and get involved in. So that would have been late 03.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did you end up deploying? Or?
I did not.
Okay.
No, I took the Q course.
Yeah. Okay.
I took that option because they didn't have a solid deployment date. Everything was still in flux. And being in a mech unit, I had to learn how to jump out of planes first, right? So I had to do airborne en route to Bragg.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you head to the Q course and you make it through your first time around, and
I had a lot of hiccups.
Okay.
So at the time, if you counted top to bottom, selection was phase 1. Mm-hmm. There were 7 phases.
Okay.
I got selected for 18 Delta, which is Special Forces medic. Like I mentioned, I wanted nothing to do with that life at all. I wanted to warfight. I wanted to kill people. I wanted to be on a team. I wanted to be pushed to be better. I had zero desire to do any medicine, and I didn't know anything about that world. So I had some problems in the 18 Delta course specifically. I did get recycled one time. Me and another friend of mine, Joe, out of a lot of failures there, they got sent, back to the SEAL commander. 1 or 2 Rangers were there that didn't make it through SOCM. A lot of dudes got sent, needs of the Army. Mm-hmm. And then we're sitting there like, are they going to kick us out? Do I get to recycle? There was a lot of dead time in those phases back then. So I spent roughly 2.5 years before I would even deploy.
Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't even deploy till mid 06 roughly. So from selection to 03, you're looking at 2.5 years ballpark.
Kidding.
And there was a recycle in there. I ate a few months.
Sure.
I got more practice.
Yeah.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, the 8-step system. Yeah.
Yeah, I did not. I learned things the difficult way, apparently, in life, or the universe has something for me. I'm not sure, but it all worked out very well. And then I showed up on a team later. They were already in theater, so I was the new guy.
So you said you weren't super interested in going the 18 Delta route, but as you started to learn more and become accustomed to it and get through those phases, was it something that you gravitated towards afterwards, or was it something that you...
At first, it was something I had to suffer through to get to the end. Then I started seeing results. Mm-hmm. It wasn't all academic. There was a lot of physical too, especially with the way that they would pair academic with field. And I was with some legit people who were great, candidates in the course, but they were like fun dudes to be around. And our instructor's really good. So yeah, I started liking it. And especially, I got down with trauma. Anything that was violent, that required you to be in a performance in a zone of chaos, that was my thing.
Yeah.
I dug that anyway. Pair that, whether it was, field, pre-hospital, surgical ward, with the tactical side, my aperture started opening to, okay, I'm starting to get this. I understand where my role is going to be, and now I'm actually interested in it.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it any more fun, with all the studying and the academic side, because I hated those. Everyone hated those black clouds being over you. You would test every other day, and everything was a pass-fail. Some of it was a cumulative average, but I got more attracted to it the deeper that I got in.
Sure.
Isn't that crazy that, you spend 2.5 years like preparing for your job and you feel prepared at that point, but yet you look across the different branches and the average training is 6 to 8 months.
Couple months. Yeah.
Introducing Bubs Naturals, a lifestyle brand inspired by the legacy of Navy SEAL Glenn Bub Doherty. Born out of a commitment to adventure, wellness, and giving back, Bubs offers a range of nature-derived nutritional products designed to help you live life to the fullest. From their flagship collagen peptides, packed with over 20 grams of protein per serving, to their functional creamers with MCT oil for sustained energy all day long. Each Bubs product is crafted with care and quality. What sets Bubs apart? Well, with every purchase, Bubs donates 10% of their profits to charity through the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. They support special operators and their families as they transition into civilian life. Join the Bubs community today and fuel your adventures with purpose. Visit bubsnaturals.com to learn more, and be sure to use code Medevac for 20% off your first order. That's MEDEVAC, all capital letters, when checking out at bubsnaturals.com.
So the further I got in, the more attracted I was learning my job, was actually proficient enough to pass the tests, was being told I was doing well. I was getting the results that I was attracted to.
Okay.
And I dug that chaos.
Yeah.
And everyone around you is doing the same thing. It's typical special operations mentality. And you're not in, you're learning how to be in. So,
and it kind of marries those two aspects you were looking for, right? The action, the DA side, but also getting to, challenge yourself mentally with medicine, and marrying that with combat. I mean, it was
wild. That was not my intent going in. I looked at it from a hindsight being what it is now, pretty immature, point of view.
Sure, naturally.
Because I wanted to go to war. I wanted to go do the things. And this was an obstacle. I saw it as an obstacle. And it turned out that it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the 18 Delta, so you said your other buddies who were in the Q course with you made it to their units beforehand.
A lot of them, yeah.
So 18 Delta is significantly longer than the other 18 series?
Correct.
Trainings?
18 months, right?
Yeah, ballpark of 18 months longer.
Wow.
If you're slow like me at certain times and you get recycled, it takes you a little bit longer. But yeah, dudes that were going through, the other aspects of it, weapons, comms, whatever, they were getting to a team and going right into, at this point, this could have been Iraq or Afghanistan, because that Iraq had jumped off in 2003. So yeah, and I was starting to hear the stories. Even my old roommate was telling me about it, and he watched me study and all this other stuff nonstop. And now he's telling me all the hot boy stories from traveling the world and doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think the most difficult part was for you?
In the Q course, by far.
Or 18 Delta, yeah.
By far, the academic on paper things.
Yeah.
And it's equivalent to what I think about schools or universities. They give you the information, they expect you to remember it, retain it, and then they test you on what you remembered. What I liked about that course that was actually very different was, yes, that was on paper, but when it came to field time, you got to put your hands on it. You got to make mistakes, self-correct, never make the same mistake twice. So the hardest part was the on-paper academic piece. When it came to the field, physicality, all the way down to drugs and drip calculations and all those things, I was good when I got my hands on it. But
Sure.
when it was on paper, it's a completely different world. I liked being put in the scenario and then having to be tested on my performance versus my ability to retain information in a linear format. That got on my nerves more than anything.
Yeah.
What do you think if you had advice for those that are maybe trying to enter this program, is there any pieces of advice or something that they could work on prior to arriving? EMT basic?
Yeah, EMT basic would help.
Yeah.
But, I had zero knowledge of any of that stuff going in.
Yeah.
You will learn what you are needed to learn. The mental aspect is the biggest thing. You will worry about these tests versus perform. You'll get wrapped up in your own head. You'll start making these scenarios that don't necessarily fit reality later on. Having a medical knowledge is great, and the guys who did better. But it literally came down to a lot of the other phases. I mean, that not wanting to quit or not ever entertaining the fact to quit, you're going to want to do that.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. You're human. You're going to want out of that situation, but understanding, the bigger picture, I think there's a level of maturity that is required to get there, and then that is built upon once you are there. On the medical side, it's changed some now. The academic piece has changed now. They've gotten rid of a lot of that dead time. They've improved a lot of that. So you're going to learn some of that, but a base knowledge going in wouldn't hurt. But it's the focus on the end result. If you're there for a Green Beret or a tab or anything on your uniform, you're already way behind, and chances are you're probably not going to make it.
Sure. Got it.
Yeah.
So fast forwarding through your training, where do you find yourself?
I finish up, late summer of 06, and then a few weeks later, I'm in Kunar province, Afghanistan. The first time my team had been there for about a month and some change.
Okay.
The guy that I'm relieving, he's the only Delta on that team, gets on the same bird that I flew in on. So there was no real decent handover.
Wow.
He had other things going on in life. So I had to figure it out. And then I was doing combat operations 48 hours later after that.
Wow.
So I didn't get this lead in ramp up process.
Yeah.
I got dropped off at 2 a.m. on a resupply flight in the mountains of what we know now to be the most violent province in Afghanistan for the next 4 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
And these guys were jobbing it. Them and another team were getting after it for a while. So yeah, that was a total of an 8-month deployment, and I got 7, 6.5 or 7 out of that one.
Wow.
And then
Impressive.
you got about roughly 3 or 4 months home, and then you were back doing it again. So that was cyclical for us.
Very high ops tempo.
Yeah, it was extremely high ops tempo. You had there was a JSOC element there. There was a few other things that were happening. You had 2 SF detachments, us further south, and another one further north. And we just kept rotating like that. Matter of fact, I was telling you off camera, today's the 25th of January. One of the guys on that other team, Robbie Miller, was killed in 08, who ended up getting the Medal of Honor. Today's that anniversary.
Wow. So,
yeah, that's where I found myself, immersed in that. And the team was outstanding. There was a lot of new guy stuff, but they were in the environment, so they were extremely, they wrote me in fast. There was a lot of things that they let me fail at, to where it wasn't, catastrophic. But I was right in the mix, and I did not like that at the time. I mean, it was, it was a scary thing. You don't know what you're doing, and you're only qualified at your job. You don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then when you start, there's shootings and there's bombs and there's this and there's that and there's aircraft and there's people getting blown up, and you're now responsible for putting people back together or ripping them apart.
Yeah.
Welcome to the suck. And that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
So you're obviously medical. What's the other mission parameters? What is your team doing, like, for the most part?
The team is primary. I mean, there's a little bit of the FID for an internal defense, but the team is direct action at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, at that time, you don't have a really robust air stack. You don't have the ISR capabilities that you have now. You don't have the attack capability.
Mobility
on
as
call.
well as
You're
limited.
way more self-sufficient than you think you have to be on paper.
Sure.
Like our Air Force combat controllers were studs, and I'm still friends. I still work with all of them actually today. They're doing direct action. We had a couple, med caps and all that humanitarian aid stuff. There was an intelligence gathering posture that came with all of that. But when you're in that terrain, that remote, resupplied occasionally, you better be proficient at many different things. And so it forced me as a new guy to be as diverse as possible, cross-trained as possible.
Yeah.
And then your primary mission is one thing, but you better be wired tight on your contingencies. Like when you go out, you don't have a platoon or 2 of Rangers. You don't have the dedicated air support, either lift
QRF is
lift or
gone.
attack.
Yeah,
QRF, you may or may not get them. And, the infantry folks that were in that region were getting chewed apart. I mean, these guys were rocking. Of course, there was a lot of battlefield occupation at that point. You had infantry guys. I mean, go back and look at all the movies. You had the Korengal outpost. You had the guys up in Blessing. You had the dudes further north that got overran at Cop Keating. We were parts of all of those. And so, they were rocking 50 cals, maybe 240s on Humvees. So
with no armor.
With no armor. So, minimal armor.
Yeah.
So you're outgunned to begin with and outnumbered. So arrogance will get you. So I was learning all of that real time. Not that I was proficient or we were proficient at it, but we fought fairly decent. And we had a half-man or half capacity field surgical team, so which your full was about 20 people. Well, these guys had state-of-the-art medical equipment right next to us, 10-person capacity. So we got our hands dirty all the time working on other Americans or, Afghan pardon forces or, civilians who were getting blown up in the mix of all this, just, from all the fallout. So, you asked me about a mission set, primarily direct action, but there's a lot of subcomponents that come with that, especially when you're rocking solo.
You're wearing multiple hats, primarily because it's the beginning and you're just trying to set it up.
Yeah, we were going gangster with it too. I mean, my primary vehicle was an up-armored 750 Polaris four-wheeler. I mean, you want to talk that? I got a pouch over here with thermal grenades. I got a pouch over here with frag grenades. I got a roped up, mini belt-fed machine gun.
Yeah.
I can go places that trucks can't. I can go places that, don't even talk to me about some of your larger armor vehicles. They're not even gonna.
Yeah.
They're just gonna get blown off the road when they hit the next IED.
Sure.
I had a little acorn jammer that may or may not work. That may or may not defeat some IED blasts here and there. Little garage door openers that'll send you off into the ravine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had a couple of those. I'm like, I'll take the four-wheeler, bro. That gives me at least some mobility.
Yeah.
So what was the biggest challenge you think you saw in the initial kind of deployment?
Me personally,
or just as a whole. Let's say as a whole, as a unit whole. What was the biggest thing that was just maybe unforeseen, unpredictable? Couldn't put pencil to paper before and plan this out. If
I'm being fair, we weren't allowed necessarily to run the missions based on guaranteed intel that we had acquired. There was a lot of top-driven, which was aggravating, and I didn't know about this before I got there. There was a lot of top-driven mandates, if you will.
Sure.
It got to a point where 2 or 3 weeks later, we were starting to see, copy and paste intel reports about a guy that we'd killed 2 or 3 weeks ago. We're like, this isn't even real.
Interesting.
Why are you sending us into this valley at this place to do this thing? And the route there is miserable. That is an extremely violent place. The people that you're talking about are there, but the main target that we're going after has been a dirt nap for a long time.
So even with that council, they were like,
they listened some, but there was a lot of handcuffs. My team leadership navigated it well. They were professional about it. The intel gathering capacity that we had was real time. We were in the environment.
Yeah.
So that would be my, it was a massive learning curve on everything. There's no way I could absorb all that information. So each day was a challenge, and the dudes were up to it. And when you're a new guy, you're literally doing what you're told.
Sure.
Free thinking to a minimum. But looking back, that was our biggest aggravation. And so when I went back the next time, we knew exactly the environment we were getting into. So it was a little bit easier. That would have been the issue, is a lot of top-driven things that weren't real. They were so geographically dispersed that it wasn't realistic. That wasn't the mission set that we should have been doing, or that wasn't portions of it that we should have been doing.
Yeah, I'm curious about that.
It was aggravating.
Yeah, they're providing intel that's not factual,
Yeah, it's not
right? And you can prove that. So based on your estimations, and I'm going down a rabbit hole here, but based on your estimations, why would they continue doing things like that?
I don't know. I can give you a bunch of assumptions.
Sure.
Again, I mentioned it before. There was a lot of battle space occupation. Yeah. So some of the conventional units were looking to further their footprint further into some of these regions.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some of the mixture of the intel and what we were actually being triggered to work off of. I think a lot of that was filtered in, not necessarily through all of our command, but there was a lot of larger battle space command that was factored into that.
Sure.
Completely gross and problematic. But again, it's something that you have to navigate. It's the environment that you're in. So just being mad at it won't solve a problem.
It could be chalked up to growing pains too, right?
Yeah.
2006, 2007 timeframe, like we're expanding our footprint out there pretty
there was
dramatically.
a lot of that. I mean,
6 to 8 was just crazy times.
yes, it was bonkers. And you
the Wild West.
You don't have you don't have guaranteed lift. You don't have guaranteed attack. By the way, the Paki border's right there. So now you have the strategic political thing that's happening with that. And now you have the tribal piece on top of that. You've got
the huge cultural shocks.
so many different cultural aspects. I mean, we had a guy on our team later that was redheaded, and a lot of these austere areas, a lot of these austere
never be
areas,
covert.
they thought he was a leftover child of the Russians from the late 80s and early 90s.
Oh, no shit.
You know, it was, you still had that. Like they were like, yeah, that war's over. Okay, cool. They did, you know.
Yeah, that's
there was a
very
lot of that
true.
happening. When I say remote, I mean remote.
Yeah.
I mean, we did horseback stuff. I mean, so
that's pretty cool.
It's it was all of those factors baked into the big pie that I'm now having to figure out or learn or whatever. And you know, again, you run in arrogant. I know everything. I'm in shape. I can climb that mountain. There's a level of immaturity for a while.
And
arrogance
and arrogance,
self-confidence to the extreme.
You know, you can. It's a good thing. It's a good thing at times.
Yeah, you have to have it. We have this conversation all the time, and this is maybe going off on a tangent as well, but that same exact thing. Is anyway.
Ego versus ego driven.
I don't want to take that, but
I was guilty of a lot of that for a while. And you're never really how's it go? You're never really dangerous till you start believing your own bullshit. And then when you find that out for real, you know, you learn how to navigate around it.
I mean, there's too cocky, right? There's the Afghani soldier. We've all seen the video of this guy with an RPG that goes over the berm and just splash all over the place. And this, that's. Maybe not the smartest, but you do feel that sense of invincibility at some point. And I think for most of us, when we talk about this across the board, it's when we lose our first friend.
Correct.
That we're like, oh, war is real.
Icarus flew way too close to the sun. Like, this is a regular Tuesday, whatever. And then you find out you're a drug addict. Like, I have to have that adrenaline to a certain degree. You know, that's where we thrive. And I mentioned chaos earlier. This is the real level of chaos. This is not an academic setting. Be careful what you wish for, because you'll get it. And
very true.
You know, and that's on repeat. And but you're in it with the dudes that you want to be in it with. You're learning while you're doing it. Life's happening. So that's what was going on.
It's a different mentality as well. I mean, we heard a story on another podcast about. Where they're putting grenades into individuals, right, which is against the Geneva Convention, and they're turning into pink mist, and here all the Marines are cheering, screaming up and down, and I'm like, this is just a different world, and it is almost like a game.
Well, they were doing that. They were doing that to us or people in our area. They were using kids to do that, and the little Chinese 1.8 delays. And, I mean, you're exposed to things. Best of humanity, I'm with my team. Worst of humanity, the things that are happening around me. And the human brain's not designed for that all at once. So the ability to navigate around it or learn from it and not repeat, again, catastrophic mistakes. Life happens. And you start losing people. People start getting injured, and you're like, why him? Like, I was supposed to be there, and I screwed up. He's not around anymore. What if? And so now you're in your own head. But again, next day, next cycle of darkness, you're going out and doing the thing. You're on a high, and then you get addicted to it.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, everyone knows that.
Is that where you found yourself? I mean, obviously you're spinning with a pretty high ops tempo. So you wrap up your first deployment. You said 4 to 6 months, and then you were right back out again, right?
Yeah. What was wild is, I love her to death, but I got married in between those two, and this had been planned.
Okay.
Wasn't
reactionary.
No. This wasn't impulsive. She was finishing a 4-year degree. I was finishing the Q course. Knew that I was going to deploy, so this was calculated. But the beast of this was get home, get married quick honeymoon, pack all her stuff, move her right into a pre-mission training cycle, right back to an 8-month deployment.
Wow.
Life is happening. And some of it's forced.
Yeah. Light speed.
Yeah. So her ability to put up with all of that and me, and, when I lose a friend, she loses a friend, and all that stuff is happening. But we already knew the deployment cycle. We already knew where we were going. So there's a lot of planning that was not in general. It was very specific to what needed to happen. So you immerse yourself in it, and you're already resource strapped to begin with. So that's my 06, 08, 09, 10, all of them. I mean, that's for years. That's what was happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just continual back and forth.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And everyone was doing that.
Okay.
I mean, we weren't special. Everyone was doing that. It turned into more of a 5th Special Forces group, primarily taking over the Iraqi theater, us taking all of the Afghani theater.
Okay.
There was a lot of, and stuff still happened outside of that. There was, all these other different countries that had, different JSETs or training things, and you had all your guys going to specialty schools, and one guy would come home from a deployment, go right into Ranger School, come right back physically depleted, go right into a pre-mission training cycle.
Yeah, that happened to me.
Yeah.
So that is exactly that happened to me. I got home from a deployment, go to Ranger School, and go right back to another deployment. And man, that was rough.
Yeah.
That's rough tempo.
Your off time exists only on the calendar.
Yeah.
And that is it.
Yeah, it's
not real.
It's theory. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mist.
Yeah.
It's a mist. It's steam. It was never there.
Fugazi.
Yeah.
So how many rotations did you do in?
I did 3 with 3rd group on active duty.
Okay.
Yeah, I did 3. The majority of all my deployments and international work, majority of that started actually when I left.
Really?
Yeah, just from a contractual point of view, advisor point of view, like I started seeing the world at scale a little bit more on a contract capacity. I started doing some things in Europe, East, North Africa, Yemen, all these other places, in addition to your standard set of what was happening in Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, things like that.
Still active duty.
No.
So that's what I want to bridge real quick.
I left active duty,
So you do 3 deployments with 3rd.
Correct.
And what's your decision on that? Why switch over to the private sector? Why get out?
The underlying factor, and I was trained to assess for a special mission unit. There was a lot of things that were happening all at once. This is pre-kids. So, the world's my oyster.
Sure.
I love what I'm doing, very disgusted with some of the strategic decisions that are being made at the command level. Some of those happened in theater. I mean, just bonehead officer from the generals and the colonel and up command that were just wild.
And what year is this?
This would have been 10 or 11.
Okay.
But the underlying issue,
which is a huge pivot,
correct,
in tactics. It was 2010 Hearts and Minds, right?
We started seeing
phase 2.
We started seeing a lot of that, and then if you're paying attention to the SF command, they wanted village stability operations. They wanted all these things that sounded really great that don't exist in the real world, especially when you're one, the general officers are misleading Congress. 2, there's a lot of risk that's being assumed with no real resources underneath of that, and now you're starting to see tracer burnout with people. The Ranger Regiment was seeing it too. Consistent deployments nonstop. Yeah. Families are being torn apart. You're starting to see the collective, at this point, 7 to 8 years, all that stuff. So my underlying thing was I was an 18 Delta. I was an E7, which was Sergeant First Class at the time. So my next contractual obligation was going to be an indefinite contract with the Army. So I forget how many years I had in. I was double-digit years at this point. So it's like, do I either go and assess and make it, assess and stay here, don't even go at all and stay here and ride out, am I willing to ride out the next decade here with some of the just visceral things that all of us are having problems with? Am I going to commit to that? Or do I want to try my chances at life external? And I don't know what that means. Like, I probably left the Army in the dumbest way possible. But I decided, it was like, hey, let's try it. I don't like the indefinite thing. 18 Delta really didn't bother me. I was doing my job. I did very aggressive medicine, but it was a fraction of my job.
Sure.
I liked what we were doing, liked the people I was around, liked everything that was happening. But do I really want to stay here? And we ended up deciding opposite of that.
Okay.
And we just rolled out and moved to Texas.
That was your plan.
That was my plan.
All right.
My plan was similar to how I joined the Army.
Yeah, exactly.
Not smart. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I have the people around me. I've got the resources and the will, call it smart, wise, or stupid, to figure that thing out.
Yeah. You had the confidence in yourself.
I had the confidence in myself, and I really liked the unknown. I really did like. I would think that through a little bit different now. I've got 2 special needs children now. That would obviously be a different thing, but I was like, hey man, whatever.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's figure it out, and we can make that. We can force a lot of things to happen. Right now, we're at a 60 or 70% solution. Mm-hmm. We can force that 20 or 30, man, whatever.
We'll figure the rest out. Yeah,
and it worked.
How long was your break before you started diving back into independent work?
I would say a year, maybe a year and a half, roughly. I figured out how to incorporate myself. Moving to North Texas, I started leveraging some friends that I had. Mm-hmm. The infrastructure of the initial network. That began. Combat controller that was with us for one of those really aggressive deployments called me up and said, hey, this entity's looking for X, Y, and Z. You're going to get a phone call. Don't be stupid. Take the job. And then hung up on me, which is normal. Yeah, it's normal him. I still work with him to this day. I love the dude to death. And so about a year and some change, I was trying to figure out life. Do we buy a house? Do we not?
Yeah. How was your headspace at that point?
I was great.
Great.
Dude, gangster rap, heavy metal. I would hit the gym. The wife had a great job that she walked into, was her wheelhouse. Okay. So she was taken care of. Again, this is pre-kids. Whatever. I mean, I really was motivated daily to attack whatever needed to be done without needing the end result. We were good with that. We had offloaded all debt. We had offloaded any real risk. And so I was like, all right, let's do it.
Nice.
Throw in the mouthpiece and get after it. Okay. It's been that way for about a decade.
All right. So you didn't deal too much with combat stress or PTS or anything like that?
Oh, I did.
Post-related?
I did, but I think that looking back at it, I was in a better place to look at it. Mm-hmm. I'm addicted to results, and that can be very, very small or they can be very large. But I was starting to meet people. I was starting to see results of my actions here. I wasn't really separating from that life. It's not something that I wanted to forget. So I was leveraging it in my favor without it being at the expense of others. So I was having fun. I was getting the results that I wanted.
Mm-hmm, sure.
Again, what's the destination? I don't know. I don't have one. It can be all of it. Mm-hmm. So let's enjoy the process.
When you have a tendency to look at your life like a journey, like a path, and the adversity that you face as a strength, then that definitely sets you up for success.
That level of confidence that you were talking about earlier, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. Mm-hmm. I was doing everything I could to ride it while pushing the envelope. And I was very confident in myself and those around me because, again, this was at the exploitation of no one. I didn't need him to lose for me to win. This was the beginning of, I don't have to compete.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't think of it in those terms at that point, but I was very confident.
And your age at this point?
30.
Which is like
29, 30.
And my point with that is to have that realization at that age is huge, especially as a young man. 30 years old to know that I don't need to compete ever again is powerful.
I wouldn't have told you that at that time.
Of course.
Again, the lens of hindsight's great, but I was getting great advice from great people, and I was meeting some very influential people to my life at that time who stuck around and who would call me out on my nonsense, whether it was learning the private sector, whether it was, hey man, what you've done in your past life is an appetizer. No one cares.
Yep.
They care, but not past the appetizer. It's not the
resume bullet.
It's not the meal. People are not going to hire you or leverage you on what you did a year, 2, 3, 5. They're great stories. It's not what you walk away from. It's what you walk away with. And how do you leverage that in your favor? I was getting a lot of that advice almost daily. That's
good advice.
I started, and you need that bat to the face occasionally. Like, hey man, you're way outrunning your headlights. You think you are something and you are not. And here's what that looks like. Mm-hmm. So I got called to the carpet a few times by some people that I trusted. And they were right. So I just I would listen and mold my behavior accordingly. Yeah.
It's important to have people like that, especially during your transition, to help guide you with those pieces, right?
Yeah, man, I needed
I think
it.
it's invaluable.
I needed it, but I don't think the combat stuff was hitting me that hard. I was riding the high versus the guys that we lost and all these other different things. They affected me, but some of that I tried to do it as much as I could to channel it as positive fuel. Yeah. There was a spiritual aspect to it. There was a lot of human advice. There was a lot of great people surrounding me, and at times I took them for granted, but yeah, they did their job. I mean, it was great. So that was my transition.
Kind of going back into the contracting route is definitely going to clear your head a little bit too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because you feel like you're a part of something bigger than yourself as well. It's a little bit different, and you're treated like a man.
You're something bigger. You're treated as a professional. You're expected to perform. So there was a training pipeline that came through it. It was so it was a comfort zone for me, but it wasn't my previous life. So I had to relearn. I had to leverage what I had done before into a different capacity and then become proficient at that. I started competing with the guys around me, and then I started failing. So I would take my step. Okay, that guy's not the problem. The thing is the problem. Focus on the thing. So yeah, it was actually a comfort zone, but again, hindsight, it was exactly what I needed at the time. And then, of course, the deployment aspect of that never intimidated me. I was all about it.
Sure.
And it also gave me a lot of my life, my time, all of that stuff. Of course, I was getting paid better than I was before, but I was leveraging my free time way better than I could have ever done in uniform. Again, I incorporated myself. I started getting
more
some
money,
contracts.
more time. What?
I started getting some contracts here and there. I started meeting some people. I started doing some things that were, yes, on my terms, but were a lot larger than me that I liked doing. So what's the problem here? Like these things are great.
Yeah.
So what types of things, you said you had to learn a whole new set of skills. What type of things are you learning?
I went predominantly, this phase of my life, a lot of different things. I'm learning aspects of the private sector. I'm learning how, contract structures are going, how you can screw yourself over, how you can learn to better negotiate. On the contract side, I'm jumping more into the ISR world, which is intel, surveillance, reconnaissance, which is vast.
Yes.
And there's many different ways that can be done. Obviously, this is a decade roughly ago. So you're not talking hand launchable drones and things that you would be, current day with 24. But yeah, it was mainly ISR. So communication platforms, digital connectivity, a lot more into the aviation, whether it's fixed wing, rotary, factoring in, Medevac, your CSAR, past life, all the rescue things, all things above the earth. So now you've got the ground aspect. Now you're learning that side of it or incorporating yourself way deeper into it.
Sure.
And the more that I worked, the deeper into it that I was required to be. And I got attracted. Like it was where I wanted to be. It was what I was doing, supporting and working with the guys that I came from. So there was a connectivity there. It was the warm blanket that worked out. And I was learning.
So you found a really good groove and a good niche for yourself.
Yeah, almost immediately.
Wow.
Yeah,
most people are not afforded that. Yeah.
Correct. And I was very heavy on myself to not take that for granted.
Good.
I really wanted to, enjoy it, but I liked being on the gas, and when it was time to come off the gas, do as much as I could. And at the same time, life was still happening. My daughter was born.
Okay.
So all this life was happening aggressively. So when I wanted to come off the gas, cool, this one did, but then this one would ramp up over here.
Sure.
And then I started landing a contract here. So then I had to execute on that. And so I was getting what I was asking for. Am I able to keep up?
Can you talk about that difference in your struggles with the military was that chain of command? In the IC world, like how different was that as far as individual control on the ground versus like coming from very, very high up?
Yeah, there's levels of BS in every organization. So yes, it was still there, but now you're pairing it with, there's a corporate structure and there's an operational structure. The operational side was where I wanted to be. And it was actually way more efficient based on who I was working with and for. Way more efficient, way more to the point, way more diverse. So you could apply yourself in many different ways, and they would leverage you in many different ways. The corporate aspect of it was tricky, like every, commercial business would be, but it wasn't like a show-stopping thing. I didn't find the level of aggravation that I did being on a team before.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the team, it was the environment. The team was the pinnacle of where every soft guy wants to be.
Sure.
After that, like you got the guys who chase command and all that stuff. But no, that was the upper echelon, and I felt I had accomplished that. The transition to this was I was learning that, and we didn't have as many handcuffs from the top down dictated X, Y, and Z. But the problem was we were forced into a higher level of accountability, which, for
because
whom
you can't
much is
screw
given,
up.
much is requested. There's a lot that you are responsible for, and you're dealing in big boy worlds. So this is life and death. At times it's yours, but more punitive, it's somebody else's.
Sure.
So the mindset never changed. Comfort zone, I can handle that. And you mentioned loss of friends. That never stopped. From the active duty side to the transition to even current day. I mean, you've got all of that stuff that's still happening. So we weren't as hamstrung, but we all knew the environment that we were in. I was just happier there than I was, previous active duty capacity.
Sure.
Yeah.
If that answers your question.
It does, absolutely. Differences in equipment.
Vastly different. I mean, your exposure to next gen or stuff that is not even going to hit the conventional, or not conventional, but even the team level soft stuff for years. I mean, I'm getting into that. I'm seeing next generation stuff. I'm seeing some of it as it's being developed.
Yeah.
Some of it
night
you get
vision is crazy now, by the way.
White phosphor.
Oh my God.
Some of it you get a hand in developing, or like, this thing,
Yeah, 'cause
that's
you're
great, it's
testing it
expensive,
out.
it sucks.
Yeah.
Or this is what sucks about it.
Yeah.
Or, hey, you're going to give us this dummy for medical aspects. Yeah, that's great. You said it's good for the field environment. Outstanding. We're going to kick it to the Halo dudes. They're going to throw it out from 25,000 feet, see if it can handle the elements, and they won't even do anything medical on it.
Are you doing anything augmented or VR world?
I am not. No, that I've seen it.
It in the next decade, that's going to be wild.
Yeah, nerds rule the world. So that's gonna happen.
Imagine getting combat experience before ever going to combat. Like, because now they have the 360 treadmills. They've had those for years, but now they have the mats that you could just walk on now.
Yeah, you're going to see a completely. It's not even the same. It's not even complete. The conversations won't even correlate. And of course, this is where I don't believe in one dimension. You're going to see multi-dimensions. Factor in your VR. Oh, now it has AI. Now it's very real. Now it's machine learning. It's learning you while you're occupying X, Y, and Z. Good luck keeping up with that. Yeah. It's going to be a completely different.
Yeah.
It already is a completely different thing. And I don't mind that. Can't control it. Don't care. The outcomes are already, going to be what they're going to be. Where's my little piece of this? Where do I fit in? Or if I don't fit in, cool. I'm good with not fitting in.
But when the near peers have similar or the same capabilities, going to war like that doesn't exist.
Yeah,
that's the big thing.
Afghanistan and Iraq will never happen again.
Yeah,
you're excellent because you own the airspace. Let me know how that goes when that doesn't work anywhere else.
Well, we're seeing that right now in Ukraine and Russia, right? They all have jammers, and they all have radio jammers and electronic jamming equipment, and they're all flying drones at each other, jamming them midair, and it's trench warfare all over again. That's all it is.
I can get hours into this. I'm not going to, but it's wild. And people are like, oh, that's not going to happen. It's never going to work. Like, that's great, man. Keep kicking doors and let me know how that goes, because that's not.
It's not real combat. That's not real.
It is for a small fraction, and that's never going to go away. But come on, man.
But like World War II, never, ever going to happen again.
No,
it can't. We were at the technological capacity for the most devastation possible globally.
Yeah.
Now we have the cyber is wild, and just destabilization.
Yeah.
Countermeasures. Countermeasures.
Yeah. And you know how the saying is with the Army, they're insanely good at fighting the last war. And, you need those thinkers outside of that who can execute in multi-dimensions in many different ways. There's a lot of things I don't think we should have our hands in. Why do we have an opinion about this? Why are we even trickling into this? Why do we care?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's a lot of that happening too.
Well, there's money to be made.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that. Don't get me started about that. But it's wild. And some of that I make fun of sarcastically. I mean,
we do too. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, sarcasm shows you've got a very active prefrontal cortex. You're a smart dude. Like, come on, let's call this exactly what it is. And it's right in front of us. Like, we're not dumb.
Well, we're also defense contractors, I guess. So.
Come on. Like, I see how this is played out.
Yeah.
But I like focusing on, the life in general versus the thing that I'm, someone tells me I have to do for the next generation. Whatever, man. We've figured it out this far. We're going to be okay. A lot of this field porn that you're paying attention to, don't worry about it. But a lot of these environments that you've seen, they won't exist in that same capacity. Tell the stories, appreciate the history. Yeah. The lives that were invested there were not at a loss for the people who actually know what's going on.
Of course.
Move on. Life, you're supposed to adapt. That's how this goes.
So you're in this community, and how many rotations? Like,
I have no idea.
It's just so many.
No, I have no idea.
And it's different
20,
tempo
30,
too.
they're all the same.
It could be 5 days. It could be a couple months. So it's all over the place.
Yeah.
So
I've been doing it for decades. The people who count weird me out. I have no idea. No clue.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk a little bit about the situation that led up to your injury.
My injury. So it's wild too, because everything that we've been talking about has been from a professional, performance from the special operations side. My injury has nothing to do with any of that.
Yeah.
And
well, you're still in it.
I'm still doing it. Yeah.
And it happens. Like,
yeah.
Life throws you curveball.
I like what's happening with me now. I'm mentally in a place where I can say that, whereas I wasn't. And I'm getting better daily, and I haven't really told the story publicly and all this other stuff. But to get to your point, the last day of March 30th of 23, I'm going to a friend of mine. She lost her son. I'm going to his burial. This is about roughly 11 in the morning. I'm on a BMW 800 GS, which sits a little bit higher. It's a, Tom Cruise looking motorcycle. It's great. If I get sick of the road, I can go on that trail over there.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. So I'm going I just pulled out of a gas station, 25, 30 miles an hour. 19-year-old female, whether she was distracted or, whatever, runs a red light, and I'm in her way in a four-way intersection, about a mile from the burial that I'm going to. So that's the injury that you're talking about.
Yeah.
You want me to keep going? I mean,
I do.
I remember.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I
absolutely.
remember everything. I was extremely vivid. So I fly off at a 45-degree angle. We have some video of this. I fly off 45-degree angle in flight. Of course, you don't know what's happening. I'm fully awake, but there was like a metal conduit box, maybe 4 or 5 feet tall. There was a bunch of them. I flew over top of them, except I clipped one on my right hip, which breaks the top of my iliac crest, and on landing, I break my left wrist, closed scaphoid fracture. Your brain does 3 things at this point: fight, flight, or freeze. I couldn't breathe. I was in a lot of pain, and I froze, especially when I got my helmet off. I was fully conscious, didn't hit my head, none of that stuff. I looked down, and I saw how disfigured my left leg was. Open compound, I got 2 arteries shooting into the street and on the sidewalk, and at this point, you're on the clock.
Yeah.
Everything that I've told you from now, I've done on other people for decades. Pre-hospital medicine,
hundreds of times.
I've even all the way up to amputations. I've delivered babies. I've done weird things to weird people. I've put them back together. I've taken them apart. This is me on a clock now. So that's happening. I'm in South Dallas. Big black dude is running up on me, and he's obviously scared, and I'm fully conscious. There's people kind of morphing and screaming, and I had a tourniquet on my bike, 150, not even close to me. It's almost as if it doesn't exist. So my clock's ticking, and I'm trying to avoid shock. And I walk him through femoral direct pressure. I grab my belt and his pocket knife, improvised tourniquet, and there's no capture with that, so I'm holding it.
Yeah.
I'm being filmed. People are calling 911, all this other stuff, and
it's wild to me that you're being fucking filmed.
You're putting your own tourniquet on.
It's happening.
People are filming it.
So improvised tourniquets statistically don't work. Well, there's a statistic that does. This day it worked. They bring me my phone off the bike, call EMS 911 on speaker. They just lay it on my chest. I don't even feel him holding direct pressure on me. Talk them onto the intersection. They get there. They're not that far away. And then, the paramedics apparently remove everything, and I start magically bleeding again. They start screwing up a wound pack. I bled pretty much till I got into the ER prior to going to CT. So fast forward, I'm in the hospital roughly 3 weeks. I wake up in the ICU. They save my leg. A lot of rods and pins. A lot of damage. I'm in an external fixator. So spend the next 3 weeks. I don't remember 7 or 8 surgeries, a bunch of plastic surgery to cover that. But they're telling me I'm going to be weight bearing on that leg soon. Which I've got a pump coming out of the right hip. I've got a pump coming out of the leg. I got all these things that are happening, and it was brutal.
Yeah.
Worst pain that I've felt to this point. I go home, recover. And that's the end of March. I go home and recover. I'm getting better. April, May, June. July 4th weekend, I don't remember the exact date, I get hit with such a massive infection. It turns out to be infection. Violent shakes. I ride it out for 30-something, 40 hours. I can get past it. I don't know it's that thing. But it's infected. They transport me right back to the exact same hospital, verify that it's they run everything on me. All the kitchen sink, Walmart, Costco of all antibiotics. They pump everything, right? So I'm going through all those protocols. They tell me that the rods, pins, everything has to come out. And I know how this game is played. Upstairs anyway, it's like we can either try to save the leg with through limb preservation, or this is going to be a below-the-knee amputation. Mm-hmm. So they gave me 48 hours, 70, whatever it was, to decide. And I called everyone I knew. Mm-hmm. I texted everyone I knew that was an amputee. Hey, man, this is what's going on. What do you think? This is what's going on. What do you think? And everyone rogered up. Man, everyone was behind me. So anyway, that turned into, we chose, you're telling me I've got a 15% chance mobility with limb preservation, but you're going to metabolically change me as a human being.
Yeah.
Pain meds, antibiotics, this may or may not work. Who's to say the nerves are going to grow back? Mm-hmm. I want to get back to my life. Like, I'll figure it out with the leg.
Yes.
It's basically where it boiled down to. It wasn't that easy at the time. It was not an easy decision, but it was like the decision that we knew needed to have. So yeah, that leg was for the streets. Get rid of it.
Most of the advice you're going to get from any amputee who's been through limb salvage, myself included, on my right leg, is going to tell you to cut it out.
I was never as grateful for the network that I had. Screw the business, screw the contracting, screw all the things. I was never as grateful for my network as not being able to get out of that hospital bed for 2 or 3 days and just talking to those guys, FaceTiming, like, hey man, this is not a thing. A year from now, you're going to be a superhuman. Hey man, above the knee guys. I got a friend of mine who's a triple amputee. Wow. He's been that way for almost 2 decades.
Yeah.
All these guys are telling me about it. That was where I became extremely grateful for those dudes. And so, yeah, that's the deal. And so the first time I met you was on a test socket.
Yeah, just
and
a couple
now
months.
I'm up walking around, climbing stairs, pushing weight, doing the things. I'm not 100%, but
yeah.
Here the mental was the way worse.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about that.
Way worse, man.
Making that decision, you had 48, 72 hours to make that decision.
Yeah.
You obviously talked to a lot of guys, but it's still a decision you have to make for yourself and your family and your future. How did you feel about making that decision? Were you confident?
Easy at the time.
Okay.
Easy at the time. It was simple.
Yeah.
Like, this is black and white. This is a 1 and 0. Not a big thing.
Sure.
After the fact,
15% is way better to hear than 50% or 60%, because
Correct.
then hope is a killer. Right?
I had a friend of mine who came and I had a bunch of amputees come visit me in the hospital. We're shooting Nerf guns at the nurses. Yeah. We're having a blast. They're like, you guys are weird. He was telling me, same thing. He goes, man, if they told you had 80% mobility, you may be running down that road. And limb preservation typically goes into the majority of them resulting in amputation anyway.
Yeah, 2+ years later.
Even the doctors were saying, like, if you do that route, it's a potential, a lot of it's called in the industry, it's a painful prosthetic.
Yeah.
I'm like, easy. So they assisted me with making my decision collectively.
That makes sense.
The hard part was when the leg came off. Primarily when the leg got closed.
Okay.
It was open for a few days, pumps and antibiotics and everything. When it closed up, it was a different level of pain that I don't know how to describe. I thought I knew phantom pain. I had no clue. I thought I knew all of that, not even remotely close. That's where the mental started kicking in.
Okay.
I took a nosedive. The identity, the ego, my ability to generate an income, walk.
That confidence.
All of that stuff that I had, it was a defense mechanism for life, and it was great, and it played in my favor. Well, all that's off.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about it now? So
You're vulnerable.
Oh yeah, extremely. My spiritual life has been improving since then. Sure. My interaction with people, of course, I was addicted to like me and Dilaudid and fentanyl. Oh, dude,
best friends.
We were homeboys.
Dilaudid was good.
Yeah, and I couldn't get enough. My tolerance was through the roof. You know, it was brutal, and that was the only way I could sleep. I'm telling you things you already know. I remember looking out under the bridge in Dallas, and I was watching those guys under the bridge, the homeless dudes, and I was like, we are the same. Maybe I'll just judge them a little bit differently. I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
I thought I knew, but no clue. I was being shown things, I think, to bring me back to a sense of look around you, appreciate the things that have gotten you to this point. What you have done, you'll get to write the next chapters. You're not dead, right? If I'd have been 6-8 feet to the left, 10, 12 to the right in that intersection, we wouldn't be here. Mm-hmm. My kids would have a different, life, whatever. But that didn't happen, so I'm not going to worry about that anymore.
Mm.
So
are
now
you still in contact with the lady who hit you?
I've never met her. No, all I know about her is a police report.
Okay.
I've forgiven her. I mean, whatever. I don't think she maliciously got out of bed that morning.
It was an accident.
Maybe she was TikToking. Maybe her and Cardi B were getting after it, and she just hit the I don't care. Doesn't matter, because the end result is what it is.
Still the same.
And I'd be kind of curious to see where a 19-year-old female is sitting, because I deadlined that car in the intersection. It looks like it hit a building.
Wow.
All the airbags and all the things. So I've never met her. Maybe I'll get a chance to. I would like to meet the black dude who was doing work on me.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll come around. All the things are connected. Yeah. Maybe it'll happen.
And it's still relatively fresh, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
Obviously that was a huge choice that you made. Are you happy with the decision?
Yeah.
And where
it's pretty permanent. I better get happy with it. I'm good.
Well, give it like 5-10 years before you get the Deadpool leg. The little tiny toesies.
Yeah, little
by
baby
then
foot
I'll have
growing
a
back.
leg that has AI incorporated.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, this is happening.
Legs.
This is happening now. Like the limbs that are coming out. We saw one Adam limbs the other day.
Yeah, Adam limbs.
That for has the first time neural controlled full articulation.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's permanently installed too.
I was gonna say it's a thing now. It's part of him.
Yeah.
Those
are cool.
We have guys that are way more. This is catastrophic if I decide to see it that way. Sure. We have guys who are way worse, and their level of confidence, motivation, get it done attitude. I look to that.
The roof.
Yeah, I look to that heavily.
Yeah.
There's a chick here in town. She's an above the knee cheerleader. Medical, I think it was cancerous. Okay. And she was doing cartwheels and kicks and all that other stuff. She just wants to get back to her life. I am more impressed by that than dudes who tell me, well, I've got 30 deployments and I'm sponsored by some company and look at this kit that I have. Dork, no one cares. No one cares.
It's like your situation as well is that, when you go overseas and you're injured, you have multiple deployments over your back. I mean, at the end of the day, you signed up for that potential possibility to happen.
Yeah.
When you're a civilian in the world and, you're that, 17-year-old girl driving down the street and that happens to you, that's tough. And two, you don't have the assets that are provided by, being in the military. Big difference there.
Massive difference. And so I look at this very differently, and it's taken me a while to get there. I've spent a lot of time with people who have advised me, again, called me out when I needed to be called out, people who were there to help me no matter what. You guys interviewed Dr. Gaudet and Dr. Eisenman from the Brain Clinic.
Doc G.
Doc G, their advice and putting me on nasal ketamine to help me with specifically the pain, that was the beginning of a mental change. Yes, a physical, but all of that stuff. I've got people helping me with peptides. We'll find a solution. I'm not tripping on that.
One of those therapies where the side effects are really good for you. Not only is it going to help with pain, but it's going to help with anxiety, depression, all those other prolonged.
It's multifaceted.
Multidimensional.
There are other things out there that help. I mean, there's no one magic button.
Yeah.
So I don't mind putting the effort in. It doesn't bother me. I don't care. I personally think this is going to be leveraged heavily for the positive going forward. If I'm right, then awesome. If I'm wrong, I can't undo it. So we can still chase that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's that journey mentality.
I don't care. I used to, but it needed to go. and I can't control that.
Yeah.
So I can have a say in what happens next.
Sure.
So let's have some fun doing that shit.
Yeah.
True story.
Let's throw on some kit and climb some stairs, or let's go play with your son.
Yeah.
Or like he's got this wicked little plastic bow and arrow. Let's do that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So how are you going to get back in the fight?
I'm already doing it. I think.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reading. There's a lot of consistent physical exertion. I need the leg to atrophy. My sockets are going to change. My work has taken great care of me. Like there's a lot of good people there who've been looking out for me. So I've got some stuff that I'm already doing on the active shooter side with police, fire, EMS consultation work.
Okay.
It keeps me motivated. Again, I'm addicted to results. Sometimes I'm too addicted to them, but I like doing those things. My wife she's been recognized as the #1 photographer here in our local county for the second year running.
Wow.
What if I help her out on the business side and she doesn't have to do that? Maybe she can just run and be creative and give to the people that she's giving to. Maybe do that. Like you asked me one specific question. I don't have a specific answer. The charity with Coast to Coast, we've doled out 6 figures paying for guys' treatment, the brain clinic being one of them.
Yeah.
I'm doing the things that I want to be doing, and
Fantastic to hear
they
it.
never stopped. They had to modify and change, but they never stopped. I didn't see it like that at the time, but that all is happening. So getting back in the fight for me, I've got a multifaceted fight.
Yeah.
I've never jumped out of a plane with one parachute. I got 5, 6, 8 different plans. It's already happening, and I'm enjoying the process of that. So whatever, I'm going to enjoy the ride instead of figuring out a destination.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Great mentality.
Absolutely.
My friend.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work out, awesome. We'll readjust and figure it out.
No point, living in the past.
Yeah,
And it's only going to beat you up and depress you.
correct.
You
And
know.
if I can help other people figure that part out, I'm down to pound. Especially with Coast to Coast, we're helping a lot of dudes. We know that. And at scale versus other charities, again, we're not competing. We don't have to, because the guys that we are working with, they're telling us lives are being changed. So we'll focus on that.
Good.
I don't need numbers. I don't have to present to you. I mean, we briefed the Joint Chiefs last year on some stuff that we're doing. We're not advertising that. We're busy getting it done. I don't have time for any of that stuff.
Good for you.
And it's
Fantastic.
rewarding.
Yes.
We talked about that off camera. It's selfish.
Yeah.
I like the high.
Yep.
So maybe my purpose has been refocused. Maybe this is the thing that leverages it in the fast lane. Maybe this is the thing that throws a freight train of gas on what we've already been doing. When I say we, because there's a lot of players in the background. There's a lot of things happening. So I think it's already being done. I got a great prosthetics team. Like they're wizards. I can drive there and say, hey man, this, that, and the other, and they'll help me out like
That's
that
perfect.
day. And they'll do that for all their clients. So I can't find a complaint for you right now.
No, that's perfect.
Yeah.
And that's,
and there will be some eventually, but
yeah. And
Whatever.
there's always going to be frustrations
Yeah.
that you face along the way, but they're challenges to overcome,
Yeah.
like anything else. You have a wicked perspective, and I'm really looking forward to watching you on your journey to ultimate recovery, to the place that you want to get back to.
yeah, thank you.
And the work that you do. So thank you so much for sharing and your service, extensive service to this country
appreciate it,
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, it hasn't stopped. It's just changed.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That whole wearing a uniform thing is an illusion. Your service doesn't end there.
Yeah.
If anything, you leverage that for what needs to come later.
Yeah.
And eventually people won't care about it. They'll care about what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And that's where you need to
Fantastic.
be, in my opinion. I've got a weird playlist. Let's do it. Like,
Love
whatever.
it. Love it.
Yeah.
Well, Johnny, thank you very much for joining us
Yeah,
today.
this is cool, man. Thank
Yeah.
you guys for the invite. If I can help you
Absolutely.
out in the future, please let me know.
Anytime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Your resilience is noteworthy. Truly.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah.
That means a lot.
Yeah.
If I can help you guys out with anything, additional great, amazing human beings to put in front of a microphone, way smart individuals, let me know. If I'm down in your neck of the woods, I'll come annoy you.
Absolutely.
You won't annoy us, brother.
You're welcome
You're
anytime.
anytime.
I'm gonna ask you weird feet questions.
That's okay.
Just don't take it personal.
That's
It's like,
okay.
hey, bro,
Listen, I got
there's
5
a 3 a.m. leg question that I'm thinking about.
It's okay. I got 5 good toesies, and that's all I need.
Yeah.
My last good toesies.
Yeah.
Awesome, dude. Well, thanks so much for sharing again and coming on. We're looking forward to seeing how you turn out, and and some of the amazing work you do for our vet community.
All right, man. Thank you.
And Coast to Coast, where can we find them?
So we're on all the social platforms. Our website would be coastxcoast.org. The X is the emblem. It's the cross hatchets. So coastxcoast.org. There you'll find us, our Facebook, Instagram, all the different socials, and that's at CXC Foundation.
Perfect.
There's a bunch of stuff on there. We've got a great videographer. There's a bunch of humans contributing to that. There's not one touch point. It's a weird syndicate. It's great. So,
good.
Yeah,
I love it.
We're knocking it out.
We'll include the links there if you guys are interested in checking out Coast to Coast. The links will be in the bio, so go ahead, hit those, and we'll see you next week.
See you next time.
Bye.